County Conversation podcast is sponsored by Daffabet, the world's leading online betting site. To find out more, visit daffabet.com. Hello and welcome to the County Conversation, the show where we take the three most interesting stories from the last week of county cricket and we give you the inside track to them here. I'm Cameron Punsonby.
I am Nick Friend.
We're back and we're better than ever. Nick's off to a wedding in rural northwest Wales later today, so we are once again apart. I have no weddings to go to, so I've been all over every single morsel of domestic cricket I can get my hands on.
I suppose we could have done this in Welshpool.
We could have done it there. I would have. It'd been a journey for me if I wasn't planning on being there. It would have been a commute. But I've been to rural northwest Wales once. Quite liked it. Would love to go again. Anyway, our three topics this week: 100 wildcards. Who's got them? Why have they got them? And are they serving the purpose that they're intended to? After all the discussion we've had about the championship restructure, it looks like we're going to be sticking with 14 games when it had appeared that a reduction in fixtures was kind of fairly inevitable. And finally, we have a bit of a deep dive special into the Cheltenham Festival, the oldest outground festival in the world, which is at risk of folding. Nick, up top, the 100 wildcards. We're going to go with the men's side of the tournament first because there's more kind of newsworthy snippets that have come out of it. The two headline grabs: James Anderson, Rocky Flintoff. James Anderson has played his first kind of batch of T20 cricket in years and years and years this year for Lancashire, and he's done pretty well, to be fair to him. He has done well. On the flip side, Rocky Flintoff, yet to make a T20 debut, been signed by his dad's team. Andrew Flintoff is the head coach at Northern Superchargers. Thoughts, please?
I think I'm profoundly unsurprised by both. I feel like for months everyone has said that these two guys would get signed up. I think Jimmy Anderson is particularly interesting here because it's easy to turn a nose up at it, and it would be very easy. It would particularly if he got picked up in the draft in April, and if he got picked up in the IPL auction he entered last year, and people would have gone through. There is nothing for that other than intrigue and a bit of PR and a bit of off-field fun. I think in James Anderson's defence, in a really weird way for like a 41-year-old legend of the game, I kind of think he's 42 now. Is he 42 or 43?
I think he's 43.
So we'll go with 43. Sorry, he was 40. He certainly has been 41.
He's 42. I tell you what, he'll be 43 by the time the competition starts. July 30th is his birthday.
I think what is genuinely really interesting with Anderson particularly is that he is in a quite warped way what the wildcards are set up for, right? He's set up for someone who's got no real T20 pedigree, who's had a very good blast, and has earned 100. And look, I'm of the view that he only had to bowl the ball with a white ball, and he was always going to end up in the competition. I think actually, if you go back to this time last year, or I suppose last August, when the 100 ball started swinging, and there was all that talk, far too much talk, in my opinion, about given this is a competition allegedly to bring new people to the sport. I don't think they need to know about whether having the 100 logo on one side of the ball is making it swing a bit more. Not sure it's going to bring in the kids, but I think as soon as they start talking about that, if you remember Moeen Ali saying, I nearly called Jimmy, from the moment that happened, I felt like this moment was always destined to come. But yeah, I do genuinely think, in the context of what the wildcards are there for and the placement of the blast for the 100 and all that stuff, I do genuinely think that Jimmy Anderson has kind of earned this gig, right? And I also think it would be a real missed opportunity for the competition were James Anderson not involved in some way.
This is played out the way. Yeah, I think the way this is played out is the way it should have done, and everyone's.
Yeah, I think it would have been wrong. I do think. I think it would have been wrong, and I think we'd have said it'd been wrong back in March, April, if he'd picked up one of the spots in the draft. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of guys who've been picked up in the draft just because they play for the county primarily because they play for the county that runs the team. But so Anderson wouldn't have been that different in that sense. But what would have been different then is that it literally was 11 years since he last played that format.
On the flip side, Rocky Flintoff hasn't played.
No, and he's 25 years younger than Anderson.
Is this... I'm going to think out loud a little bit here because there is an uneasy element to the whole Andrew Flintoff story and return to the game, which you kind of willingly turn a blind eye to because he's such a legend of the sport. He had such a horrific accident, and anyone in their right mind, whether they were a friend of him or just a colleague, would be like, "There's this guy who's really kind of had a tough time. We've lost him to the sport. Let's do what we can to get him back."
He's also like a hero to like everyone of our age.
Yeah, correct, absolutely.
So it's actually I think I'm net still in the camp of I'm just it's just great to see Andrew Flintoff,
I agree. You know what? And I'd do
like
the
in the
same.
get like as head coach of the Lions
we work
and
in
involved in the
we
100 and
work in the cricket media. For the most part, I'm not a very starstruck person, but occasionally when you brush past someone, you go, "Oh, blimey, that is Andrew Flintoff." That for me is Andrew Flintoff, Ricky Ponting, occasionally Kumar Sangakkara. Haven't met Brian Lara yet, but Brian Lara would be it. Those are like the guys for me, and so it's brilliant to have him in the circles. It's all there's always this little bit of uneasiness where you're like, well, he's Rob Key's mate, and then he got the England Lions gig, and then he got the Northern Superchargers gig, and is Richard Thompson, the ECB chair, is his agent, and you're like, oh God. But you kind of brush that all to one side. And then he signed his son, who hasn't played a T20 game. And it's like the thing with Rocky Flintoff, and this is 100% true and legit, is he is genuinely or 100% meant to be a very special cricketer. Aside, forget who his dad is. People say this kid is really, really good, and
he's a
he wouldn't be getting
17-year-old
these
kid.
opportunities.
He's a 17-year-old kid with an England Lions 100, like
Yeah,
in
he's
Australia.
backing it up. It's like the Surya Vanchi stuff where he goes like, "Oh, you're like, oh, is this a bit of a gimmick? Like, oh, he's so young," and it's like, no, and he scores runs. So had Rocky Flintoff been signed by another 100
Yeah.
franchise, I'd have been like, cool, that's exciting, a thing to look at. Another person, another tick in the box of his credibility. And as it happens, I'm kind of like, oh, really?
I think as well, partly, I know what you mean. I don't disagree. I think part of it as well is I find this a difficult topic to discuss because he's a 17-year-old child, and
Yeah.
this none of this is on Rocky
Oh, of course
Flintoff,
not. Yeah.
and it's you've got this precocious talent who who happens to be the son of Andrew Flintoff, and let's face it, whatever he achieves in his career over the next 20 odd years, same with Corey, who's a couple of years older than on Kensburg's, will always kind of be through the lens of, certainly for us and people of our generation, through the lens of his, the Flintoff name, because that's what we grew up with. And I find it an awkward one to discuss. He's not played any county cricket at all this year. He had a back problem at the start of the season, which means he bowls wheels as well. And I remember speaking to lads who were on the Lions trip to Australia with him over the winter, and I said, like, I was not asking for them to talk about Rocky Flintoff, but it was a young group, and I said to a few of the guys, I'm speaking to James Coles, Sonny Baker, a couple of the other guys have been out there, and said, who, young squad, a lot of guys who aren't Sam Cook out there, who impressed you? And remember James Coles, I dug up this quote a few days ago, he said, it would be silly of me not to say Rocky Flintoff. Because at one point I was facing the nets and the 16-year-old kid started bowling rockets at me, and I thought he was a batter. But he bowls as well. Like, so he's a huge talent, and the 100 from day one has got itself into this slightly weird position where no one is
Yeah.
quite sure what it is, whether it's a celebrity competition where Shane Warne was London Spirits coach, or whether it's a deeply analytical competition um, where Simon Catterish, Manchester Originals coach, or McDonald was Birmingham Phoenix's first coach. And, no one's, there's always been this little bit of what is it? Why wasn't KP involved in the first edition? Why wasn't Flintoff involved in the first issue? Why were Chris Gale, Lester Malinga undrafted in the first edition? Why was Dane Vilas, the first signing for Manchester Originals? There's always been this little bit of it that's been a bit. Do you know what I mean? Like,
On that note, let's go to the picks. So how does, in my mind, a lot of them have served the purpose. So on paper, the wildcard picks are literally written down as these are to be kind of given to those who have performed well in the blast. So you're rewarded for your domestic performances with a franchise deal. And I think for the most part, and this is where I think we disagree, Ben Sanderson, George Scrimshaw, Callum Parkinson, Ajit Singh Dell, Ben Kellaway, Toby Albert, like those guys have played well.
no, I don't think we massively disagree. I think my point is slightly broader. I think what you think we're disagreeing, what you're saying we disagree on is I think is the sense that the wild card name doesn't necessarily fit what these picks are. If that, and I think you're right. Those names, particularly Ben Sanderson, who at the start of the blast is 1,000 to 1 on 100 deal, really, isn't he? Let's face it. He's a high class English style red ball seamer predominantly. He's had a very good blast for Northants. His numbers slightly skewed by taking 6 for 8 in one game, but that's proper root maths there. He took 6 for the last game. It counts. Um, I suppose what I mean when I say I wonder if the name is fit for purpose is that I feel that increasingly, whether the blast is played in its entirety before the 100 next year, which I think is very likely, I think with the way the 100 is going, ownership wise, some teams being entirely owned by external investors, some teams being 49%, whatever. Um, Very few of the head coaches having 100 head coaches having any link back to the counties. Um, I do wonder how many of these vitality wildcards, which is what they call, because the whole idea is linking the blast to the 100. I
Oh,
do
are they? I
wonder.
missed that. Yeah.
I do wonder how much of these picks going forward will have anything to do with the blast, and whether what you'll end up with is teams being run by people who run IPL teams who are very used to having their squad from the time of the auction, just picking what they want. They will, there'll be two guys who don't get at auction. They'll go, we want these two lads, or we want these two guys with, we want these two skill sets at the very least. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. I think the only instance of that, I think for the most part, it will stay fairly similar-ish because people want, if someone's in good form and they're playing well, and you will of course tailor that to the squad you need. You'll be like, we need a left-handed middle order batter. Who's been the best left-handed middle order batter in the blast yet this year? I think
Well,
where
I think Callum Parkinson's a good example. I think Callum Parkinson was top of the list for 2 or 3 counties who were after a left-hand spinner and he went very early. I think he might be the
yeah,
first pick in the wildcard draft. Um, yeah, I think you're right, and in that sense, and there were one or two guys who Toby Albert went to Southern Brave. Partly said a very good blast, but I think we'd also be lying to ourselves slightly if we didn't say that Adi Birrell, his county head coach, is also Braves head coach. There will
yeah,
obviously be a bit of that in the same way that Ben
sure.
Kellaway, Welsh Fire have been forever after a Welshman to play for them, and Ben Kellaway has been one of
That's
the great.
fine. I think
No,
that's
no, 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 I was,
fine.
no, 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 I was going to say he's been one of the. No, no, forget that. What I was going to say is he's been one of the breakout cricketers of the entire county season. So you can absolutely see why Kellaway, like that, goes from
Yeah,
Glamorgan to Welsh Fire. So, but I also think Kellaway with the intrigue around both bowling both arms and all that stuff, and being a very talented batter, he was always going to get one because he had a very good blast. And Sing Dale bowls quick, hadn't played much blast stuff previously, played a bit more this year. Once again, you can see how he gets in. And George Scrimshaw has obviously played white ball cricket for England. So you can see how a tall quick who's having a good season at a team having a good blast gets in. So I think there is a little bit of everything in there. But I would retain that concern slightly over as the 100 as a competition moves further away from the counties,
sure.
whether the wild cards even exist in 2 years' time. It wouldn't surprise me if these owners and these teams who are used
Okay,
to
I
doing things a
understand that.
certain way
Yeah,
go, we want to know our whole squad from January onwards. And the other one we've not touched on yet being Hilton Cartwright.
yeah. Well, that's I was so. This I do think is a little bit naughty, and I don't think is the purpose of it. I think wild card should be a domestic pick, and so in effect, Hilton Cartwright, who has gone to
Southern Brave.
Bray,
Yeah, Southern Brave.
um, they lost an overseas
They
player.
lost Faf du Plessis to injury and
They
signed
lost Faf
Jason
du
Roy as
Plessis
his
to injury,
replacement.
signed Jason Roy as a replacement, which means they had a wild card pick that they could be spent on a overseas. And I think that defeats the point. And I think if that is a loophole that can be exploited, it should be closed. They should have replaced their overseas with an overseas player and then picked up Jason Roy as a wild
And
card.
that I think is my point from before, like where that yes, a lot of these picks are based on blast performances, but there are some that aren't. And I think that one in particular, and obviously in Rocky Flintoff's case, I've never played a blast game. You can understand why there are players who are pretty, pissed off because you have a good blast and you. The Cartwright one's fascinating. I'd be surprised if that loophole is still open this time next year. He was the first. This is the first time in the 5 years of the competition that has happened. Um, that a wild card has been spent on an overseas player. I'd be surprised if that can happen again because I do think I do feel like these, particularly that vitality bit. I know it's about the blast, but I do also think it's about county cricket, and
Yeah.
that is that doesn't sit terribly well in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I'm pretty chilled with it. I think the connections between if you're a 100 county and um, if you're a county with a 100 team attached to your ground, I think that is a real thing that does exist. And where if I'm a player, I'm like, what's the chance? If I average 30 in the blast at a strike rate of 150, am I more likely to get a wild card if I'm playing for Glamorgan or Northamptonshire?
Well, and but on top of this, and people have talked about this as happening for years, but like I know from speaking to players this summer, and that there are contracts being offered for for players moving from one county to another, where we will pick you in our 100 team. It is kind of part of the pitch,
Right.
and
Okay.
that is an inevitability, I suppose. But it is not. It speaks to all the level playing field stuff that people from the non-host counties have spoken about from for 5, 6, 7 years, I suppose. So
Sure.
I do sympathise with Cartwright playing for Hampshire at the moment. You do look at that and how he ends up at Brave and go, that surely that is not what
Right.
we're trying to achieve on a broader level here.
I must admit, I had forgotten in my moments of weakness
That he
that
plays for
Hilton
Hampshire.
Cartwright was also playing for Hampshire. Oh, good. Yeah, don't think that's a good one. Makes me feel weird. Anyway, the women's side of the competition, there has been a far greater kind of correlation with
Hmm.
of meritocracy. The main storyline here is seamers. Everyone's signing the quicks. To name but a few: Phoebe Turner, Esme McGregor, Grace Thompson, and Charlie Phillips. Two names I want to pick out there. One, Esme McGregor has basically been the top wicket taker of the Blast this year. She is a young seamer from Middlesex, from Essex. Um, I we cover a lot of cricket, Nick. I've covered a hell of a lot of the tier one stuff this year. I must admit, I remember checking the leading wicket takers, and I went, eh? And that was kind of this is the point. It's the new generation, new professionalization of the women's game. Esme McGregor has performed well. She's now got a chance to perform at the 100. 10 out of 10. Congratulations. That's what it exists for. And Charlie Phillips, this is more of a personal favourite. She bowls bumpers, and I think we've actually spoken about her on this pod a couple of times before. She was invited to like an England training camp at the start of this year, and there's amazing videos of her just like bouncing Danny White, Hodge, and they're all wearing like training gear, and she's in like shorts, and it's fun. She played against Surrey for who she with
Yeah,
again,
for
the
the
Blaze
Blaze.
recently, and it was awesome. It was so
We were
much
both
fun.
there. She bowls proper like slingy round arm bumpers from round.
Yeah,
Also bowls round the wicket bumpers at right handers.
it's awesome. It's really fun to watch. The Blaze as a whole have a very exciting bowling attack where they just have every single type of bowling you've ever featured. We're going to speak about this more next week because the women's blast is the group stage is about to finish, and for as much as we've loved the competition, had a pretty damp squib finale in terms of everything was sorted before like the end of it. But in 2 weeks' time on Sunday the 27th of July, if you are in the vicinity of London, get yourself down to the Oval. It is the finals day. It's going to be second versus third, which is
The Blaze versus
confirmed to
Bears, wasn't it?
be the Blaze versus the Bears. And then the winner of that match will play Surrey. Surrey have been dominant, 10 wins out of 13, 10 wins out of 12, really. They had a no result. The only team that's beaten them this season,
The
the Blaze.
Blaze.
Where did they beat them? At the Oval. So it's good stuff, man.
The Bears have done brilliantly to come third, but I think for the competition and for the final and for the narrative of everything, we'd love to see a Blaze v
Blaze,
Surrey
sorry.
final. I think would be, but
And you know what? I
the Blaze
can't
have done
wait.
brilliantly. Sorry, the Bears have done brilliantly because we spent the whole competition saying they've got no batters. They've got a lot of all rounders. They've done really well to finish top three and comfortably top three as well. As you say, like there's been so little narrative for a few weeks for a week and a half now with the women's comp that we've all kind of been clinging to the idea that if Surrey lose both games and if the Blaze win both of their remaining games with bonus points, then they would finish level on points and they could usurp Surrey to finish top themselves, which is never going to happen. But it's been it's been very clear. And I think the most interesting thing about McGregor actually is that season leading wicket taker in the comp in a team that has won 3 out of 12 or 3 out of 13, that's second bottom, that have not had a good tournament at all.
Yeah,
And you've got this, as you say, uncapped, pretty unheralded, sort of come from proper left field. Great story for the competition. As you said, the other you listed two of those four in Phillips and McGregor as ones to look out for. But I know as well that England really like Phoebe Turner, really interested by Phoebe
yeah,
Turner, who's one of four, I think, Durham players who were drafted in the wildcards, um, which also speaks to, I suppose, like the ambition and the shrewdness of their recruitment over the winter that we talked about a lot previously, and but just also, I think, more broadly, like the number of quality youngsters coming through this year in the through Darwin year one.
absolutely. Phoebe Turner bowls bumpers as well. Everyone bowls bumpers. I love it. It's great.
The
A bit.
filer effect, you know.
It's Oh, we didn't even touch that. Well, another time we'll do the Lauren Filer effect. Another time. To touch on the cricket draft. We're back to 2 rounds of county championship action in the men's. It's going to be the Kookaburras. Get your spinners in.
Get your seamers out.
There's only one place I'm looking, and that's Sai Kishore for Surrey. He's been signed for this. I was working a Surrey game last week, and Kishore was having a bowl just in the middle. And Ali Brown, former Surrey batter, was watching him bowl and was like, yes, this guy looks the business. He loved it. It's just good stuff. Kishore signed, I'm pretty sure, through the Gujarat Titans connection, that the reason why Sai Sudarshan played for Surrey over the last couple of years, because Vikram Solanki was at Surrey, is also at Gujarat Titans. That's where Kishore's made his appearance from. Nick, do you have anything?
I think you're right to say spinners. I think you're probably also right to say pick any batters. Just pick any batters, they'll all score runs.
Pick the batters. Right, that's the end of part
Kane
one.
Williamson.
We'll be back.
Kane Williamson.
Kane Williamson. Yeah, Kane Williamson and Sai Kishore. There you go. Right, that's the end of part one. We'll be right back after this ad break.
The Cricketers' award-winning team brings our subscribers news, features and insight on county and international cricket every single day. You can try us now by signing up for £1. Yes, you heard that correctly, just £1 at thecricketer.com/digital.
Nick,
Cameron.
we talk about the restructuring of the county championship a lot. And it sounded like, it felt like we were going to see some change. We were going to see a reduction in fixtures, whether that's a good or bad thing. But it feels like now the sands have shifted and we're now going to remain with a 14-match county championship season. And the potential for change will be, well, whether it's a 8-team Division 1 or a 10-team Division 1.
No, not quite.
Okay.
I think that's. I think there's a middle. I think that's you've highlighted both ends of the spectrum there. The change or frankly or no change. I think I suppose where we are is seeing why it is so difficult to pass anything because of the need for consensus. I think what is clear is that whatever happens or doesn't happen will not be a landslide, if that makes sense. You need 12 out of 18, you need two-third majority to cause change. And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, Middlesex followed Somerset and Surrey in publicly stating that they support and only support a 14-game county championship. But even within those three, Somerset and Surrey quite like the idea of a top team, an 8-division top tier. But then Middlesex want a 10-team top tier because, of course, they would, because they're in Division 2. So if you're not among the challengers, why would you want, you're not going to vote for a small Division 1. You're not going to vote to make it harder for yourselves to get into the top tier and therefore vote for yourselves to play in a disjointed Division 2, which would mean 10 teams without playing each other twice and would mean a lot of dead rubbers at the end of the season. So we are talking about, it's sort of like the Russian dolls of consensus. Like within one bit, you've got to get consensus on one thing, then you open that can of worms up, and you go, right, if we're saying 14 games, then what we're saying. I think I'm right in saying that, and I'm not 100% on this, but a couple of people I've spoken to have suggested that it's 2/3 majority for the first bit to get to either right, rather going 14 games or 12 games, and then from there it would be a majority verdict on whether it's 10-8, 8-10, 12-6, 6-6-6, 12. So there's
666. Yes.
no, that's the wrong 6-6-6. 6-6-6 is the Bob Willis. 12-6 is the
Yeah, I know the three divs of six isn't an option, but I just I said it a million times. Just whatever
oh sorry,
happens,
I see what I mean. You want three divisions.
whatever
We're not getting
happens,
that.
just have people playing the same number of games and playing against each other the same number of times.
That is what the 12-6 would do. I mean, there's no point going over this bit of old ground, but I think so we did this one a couple. We did a whole episode on this. Go and listen to that one. But Durham, the latest county to speak out publicly with what they want. That is broadly what they want. That's what they've pitched. And then Worcestershire as well have said that they support either that, the 12-6, 12 game option, or they would also support a 12 game version of the 10-8, 8-10 two divisions. They are of the view that there should be a reduction
Hang on,
of two Champion games.
hang on. A reduction to 12 teams to 12
No,
games,
but
but
retaining the current
but
structure.
retaining it a 10-8 split. I think that's one of the worst ideas I've ever heard.
Well, it's not. It's unlikely to happen. But my point is, where we're at is not that it's going to stay at 14 or it's going to go to 12. I think where we're at is that everyone has realised. And to be fair to Rob Andrew, who's the head of professional game for the ECB, he spoke to us at the start of April, and he was very clear, very keen to stress that A, this was not an ECB edict, that they would not be running the show, and B, the counties would have to get consensus, two-third majority consensus, in order for any of this to happen. So I think we'll get that on the One Day Cup, and we'll get that on the Blast. I think there is enough agreement on 2 out of 3. But I reported on Sunday morning that the PCA had sent a letter signed by Ollie Hannah-Dolby, the chair, to all the county CEOs and the chairs, essentially reiterating the player view, the player body view, which was reminding the clubs of the survey results that the PCA done for the last 2 years around mental and physical well-being caused by the schedule, and they are overwhelming in the direction of calling for change. And the PCA were pretty keen to remind clubs that that the players are their employees and that they should be giving some consideration to the views of their employees, not just the members and not just the commercials of it. So that letter to me read as not desperation, but very much an awareness that this is not
Direction of travel.
yeah, this is not as simple as right, everyone's in our corner, let's just do this. I've also been told that the vote when it comes is a private vote. So it'd be interesting to see how many counties, all the counties might come out and say what their views are, but that is not to say that we will know which way they vote when the vote happens. Rob
I
Andrew
like that.
Rob Andrew said back in April something along the lines of, we have 18 teams who don't think the current structure works, but we've got 19 solutions to the problem.
Yeah.
And that was kind of foreseeing where we are now, which is that we've got these 5 options drawn up, roughly speaking, 5 options, based on 2 principles, which are 14 games, 12 games. And we need somehow to get consensus on one of those 2 to start us off. And then we need a majority to confirm to us what the overriding system is going to be. So I wouldn't say it's as simple as we're going to stick with what we had, but I certainly think we're in a place where that is not off the table. Whereas I reckon 2 months ago the assumption was that this process was taking place so we could choose the new one. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. Just to give a little bit of flesh on the bone to what Durham's proposal was, they wanted this 12-6 split, which is basically a 12-team Division 1, but it's split across 2 conferences. And so everyone plays everyone once, and then the idea is that so the solution that was given to maintain 12 games in the way that we'd previously spoken about on this show is you'd play everyone in the opposite conference to you both times. That feels a bit weird to me, but it is kind of neat and tidy. Darren was saying you play everyone in your own conference, home and away, which gives you 10 games because you're one of the 6. You play the other 5 home and away, and then you play one of the other teams in the other conference both times. again, that's the type of stuff I hate, because what if you get to be the team that plays against the
Surrey home
worst
and
team in the
away.
league? Yeah,
Or
like it completely corrupts the integrity of the competition. However, things that I do like is that they want a final. They want a kind of Sheffield Shield style 5-day final at the top. They want two up, two, or more than two up, two down. They want the top team of the bottom division, Division 2, which would have 6 teams, gets automatically promoted. And then the team that's second in Division 2 would then play a playoff against the worst second place finish or something or other. And I do think that has, I think when you have this mess of games and this mess of trying to fit different numbers into different non-neat shapes, that is when playoffs work in your favor. The problem with kind of the problem with not playing each other the even number of times come if you're having a meritocratic league system. It's less of a problem if you've then got playoffs and you've got opportunities to double up and win or save your season. I also think these playoff games, whether they be promotion or relegation or for the title, add more games to the calendar. So if you do have an overall reduction in fixtures, you then have these showpiece events which will appease people to a certain extent. Right, quick question, small answer to round off this segment. When is it likely that this is all going to be decided?
Well, I think the first day we were given way back when was July 10th, and that was a week ago.
Yep.
I think the end of July is what everyone keeps saying. I think there's an ECB board meeting on something like July 30th or something like that. So there's a hope that they could sort of get things ratified then. I think that fits quite nicely. I don't think it can be much later than that, because everyone does kind of need to play. Everyone does need to know what they're playing for this year as well. That is a relevant part of this. I don't think it'd be very unfortunate if Leicestershire were promoted into nothing. With the reward for winning Division 2 is being in a slightly smaller Division 2 next year. End of the month, I think, is the direction of travel I've heard. But as I say, I had heard 7 days ago, and that's not happened. But it does need to be sooner than later.
So the good news for all you loyal viewers and listeners is that in 2 weeks' time, we get to do this all over again. We can chat through the results. Right, we're going to move on to the Cheltenham Festival.
Not the horses.
Not the horses.
Crucially.
So, Nick, you did an article with Gloucestershire and about the Cheltenham Festival. To begin with, can you just tell us what it is?
So it's the Cheltenham Festival is the oldest outground, the longest running and oldest outground festival in the professional game. First place in 1872, which is a long time ago. I was going to do the maths and then I gave up.
1872, that is 153 years ago.
3 years.
There you go, don't worry about it.
It is the longest running, oldest outground professional cricket festival. Takes place at Cheltenham College, on which ground I was part of the losing team involved in the largest ever margin of defeat, I think.
Oh, yeah? In what?
50 over game, lost by 281 runs. Not a good. It was just a club. If a couple of decisions had gone our way.
I tell you what, you're really lucky because you cut out just at the moment. I saw your lips moving to say the number of.
Sorry, do you want me to say again? 281.
Yeah,
281 runs difference between the teams. It's tighter though. It's tighter than it sounds. No, it's that's what it is. And what it is now is approaching a really tricky, important year. This isn't rocket science, but they can't, in the words of their chief executive Neil Priscott, they can't keep losing money off it. We've spoken a lot about Gloucestershire's finances on this show in the past, and I think there's certainly part of that is why they're losing so many of their players at the end of this season. They lost 80 grand or close to at last year's festival, and they lost a similar number in the 2023 event. For a club that's lost a lot more than that in the last 2 years, that is not sustainable, good business. On top of that, the man hours that go involved, that are involved in it. If you think of how skeletal most counties are in their staffing structures, to be putting in the amount of work that they are putting into this festival, and it's not Scarborough. Scarborough's got the advantage of having a stand, a permanent stand set up. They go to Cheltenham. they build a cricket ground on a field, basically.
Yeah,
Um, and not just a cricket ground. It's not just your out. It's not just your odd out ground day at, I don't know, Radlett, Guildford, whatever. It's a. It's got to be good enough and uh, of an appropriate quality for the hospitality that you get for these, for 2.5 weeks at this, for the events going on. Essentially, they've got to make enough money off it, so it's got to be good enough to upsell on, because the sort of like the start out costs before you've sold a ticket are enormous. If you think back to a couple of years ago when Middlesex played those games at Chelmsford in the last year rather, that was done. Um, that was done to save money on outground rigging, essentially. The cost of setting up Radlett Merchant Taylors for a one-off blast game made no sense, and and yes, Chelmsford didn't work as a trial, as an experiment, but what it did do is save money.
yeah,
So if you take that on a small scale and put it into what Gloucester are doing for 2.5 weeks, or sorry, more than that, 3 weeks, two championship rounds, a blast doubleheader, a blast women's standalone game, and then Gloucester men's first one day cup match. Um, to do all that, you need round the clock security, you need temporary stands, you need caterers, you need all the things that you don't need to no, don't you don't need to think about when
yeah,
you're playing at your home ground. So they, they've been pretty honest, and Neil, the chief executive, said to me last week that in pretty blunt terms, if they cannot make it work this year with that schedule they've got, and the weather we've had this summer, they will really struggle to justify doing it again.
yeah. And something I wasn't couldn't quite understand was kind of reading through your piece. Prescott talks about how the festival used to make them £100,000. It used to be £100,000 of,
Couldn't believe it.
of profit, and now they're losing £80,000. So that's a swing of 180 grand. Like what's like how like what's changed?
No, I struggle with that. I think one part of it, and as Neil talks about in that piece, is the just the way that the hospitality market has changed since COVID, and but obviously not to the tune of 180 grand. Um, but certainly the way that hospitality has changed, it's not. It used to be, I think, that you would just sell a tent for 10 corporates for a day at a time, and you do that 20 times over, and you do that
Yeah,
5, 10 tents over, and you bring in a lot of money that way. Um, and I think the other part of it that certainly they lost last year. So last year's Cheltenham Festival was much earlier in the year. I think it was sort of late June into the first half of July. If you remember, a very, very famous game there last year was the tie with Glamorgan, the 592
yeah,
run chase. So amazing game, but broadly took place in front of a pretty empty crowd. That was late June, first week of July, that match, which is before school holidays come in, with a pretty wet, cold summer last year, further impacted by the fact the men's Euros were taking place on top of it. They're much happier with what they've got this year, and they're very grateful to the ECB for what they've got this year. Because it is, if you think of all the things I just said there, it's a month later, starting
yeah,
late July, in summer holidays. Going into summer holidays, the weather's been better. We don't have the men's Euros on, and last year their sort of marquee games were that game, the tie, which was a great game but broadly empty, and the final day of which took place on the same day that Bristol were hosting a women's ODI against New Zealand. So a lot of the Gloucestershire, fan base had already been being sold sort of tickets for that day.
yeah.
I was there. I briefly looked at the travel to if I could dash to Cheltenham for the end of this, then go back to that game, and I didn't do it because it's about an hour away. But the other the other game they had was a 4-day youth test between England and Sri Lanka, which is a great game on paper and a nice thing, but you're not going to sell that out, are you?
No,
So
yeah,
the advantage they've got is they've got Lancashire at home, who traditionally bring away supporters. James Anderson will, could well be captaining, and Middlesex as well, not too far off their supporters. They bring some away fans with them. They're both live games in the context of the championship. They would hope that works if they get the weather we've had recently. Um, that immediately um, that is a saving grace immediately, coupled with the fact that I think the stat is something like they've got like between 35 and 39% of Gloucestershire um, attendances for championship games are
I saw
walk-ups
this.
rather than
Yeah,
pre-sale, which is an enormous amount to rely on the weather and the state of play in a game, isn't it?
I'd love to know other counties' figures for that and let's see how they compare. So, what is? I guess the ultimate question here, though, is how can they reverse it? Is there any hopes for the future of it, or is it going to be this case of we are paying to run this historic event because the value is in the history as opposed to the present day.
I think it's twofold. I don't think they think they're going to make 180 grand swing. They'll be making 100k off it this year. I think they want to see them. I think the phrase that Neil used was a momentum shift. They want to make some kind of profit, partly so their staff feel like all of their work has been worth it, but also because it makes no financial sense to keep running something with that requires those man hours at a loss, particularly when at a county like Gloucestershire you've seen 6-figure, 7-figure losses in the last couple of years. That is not worthwhile investment. And one thing they've been very big on since Prescott went in as the new chief executive and the new chair came in as well. They've got new members of their board and stuff. They've been much tighter with their purse strings. That was how the Cam Green deal happened, really. They said, we will not overspend our playing budget, but if anyone, and that was essentially the trigger for a member to come to them saying, I'm happy, that was how that deal for Green happened, through a member coming to them on the back of being told that things are tight, basically.
Yeah.
But there is a secondary part to this. It's important to mention because I think this is the reality of the reason they are still doing this festival. Is that Gloucestershire is a vast region of which Bristol is sort of shoved into like the southwest of it, I want to say. Bristol doesn't even have a Gloucestershire postcode. It's got a Bristol postcode, a BS rather than a GL postcode. A lot of the county's members and cricket lovers more generally do not live anywhere near Bristol. Bristol's 40 odd miles, 50 odd minutes away from Cheltenham. So it is also a way of engaging with their sort of wider clientele. Would they lose a load of members if they didn't do this? They probably would. Even in Bristol, don't know if you've been to the ground, but even in Bristol, it's not in Bristol. It's sort of like in a residential area shut behind some houses. So it isn't. They do need to do this like outreach, and we should want counties to do it as well. To go beyond their home and to sort of take it on a road trip and make it a road show rather. So that's the other reason for doing it. But you can only justify doing that, I think, if you're seeing something in return. It's not sustainable based on the last 2 years. And I think, like a lot of things in county cricket, is one of those things where if you kind of started the game from scratch now, you probably wouldn't say, "Look, we're going to do a 3-week festival on the grounds of a school."
Sure. Well, we kind of keep our fingers crossed for Gloucestershire, because it does. I often kind of roll my eyes at kind of outground cricket to an extent. I don't know if I mean that. I think I did when it was like kind of. On the one hand, I go, why are we doing this? On the other hand, I go, it's really nice. And if it matches down at Guildford, or I know Rockhampton down in Gloucestershire hosts a lot of kind of twos cricket or host events, like, it is different. It's fun. It's an excuse for people to come along. And with Cheltenham having hosted this for the last 153 years, it would be incredibly sad if that stopped. That's it this week. We've done it. The County Conversation podcast is brought to you by DafferBet, the world's leading online betting site. If you do want to find out more, visit dafferbet.com. I've been Cameron Punsonby. Nick Friend's been Nick Friend. He's got a wedding to get to. I'm going to go and get a haircut. So contrasting Thursdays, which is when we are recording this. Yeah, lovely to speak to you. Lovely to see you. And if you are listening and speak, you know what? Be on your way. We'll see you again next week.